Very rarely does a wrestler's year end up being as amazing as these in this video. Now, if you guys enjoyed this one, we could do another one if you guys give it 1,000 likes for part 2. With that said, let's get into it. Ric Flair by the end of the 80s had established himself as the greatest wrestler in North America. There wasn't a single area of weakness for the Nature Boy. You couldn't poke a single hole into the argument that Ric Flair was one of the best around. He had the wrestling skills, the charisma, the drawing power, the promo, the character, nothing. And the best part was that the fans hadn't seen the Nature Boy in his final form. 1989. This is one of the most important years in Ric Flair's career. Some of his greatest matches and title run, the greatest title run from his 16 title reigns, or 21 technically, come from this year. Ricky Steamboat was the man, and Flair used every trick in the book to make Steamboat look like he was inferior. This was prime Ric Flair, a man with an admiration for the riches of the world, going up against Steamboat, who was much more grounded and relatable to the fans in the arena. Their 4-match feud was incredible and ranks up there as the greatest in-ring feud in wrestling history. You have to talk about these matches if you discuss the 80s, WCW, or Flair and Steamboat themselves. It's important. I watched these matches and understood why they were seen as the pinnacle of their era. You had the perfect good guy, a family man, and the perfect villain, a man obsessed with appearance, status, and worldly gains. Chi-Town Rumble, their first match, is the one people talk about the most, and for good reason. Now, these two developed their chemistry over several years in the past, and even then, Flair doesn't think high of these matches because he believes they had better matches without the cameras around. Some actually like their house show match, but it's in bad quality. Well, you could see the action. But these 4 matches raised the bar on professional wrestling. There's many reasons to see why people think highly of these two, even if you take away these matches. However, these two were meant to be wrestling each other. They were each other's greatest opponent, and in storyline, Ricky Steamboat pushed the cheating Ric Flair to do it all by himself. In front of his greatest challenge, the Nature Boy managed to best the Dragon clean and reclaim his title. And this was followed by a feud that offered something different. Terry Funk. Terry Funk was seen as a man who was past that. He had been selected as a potential judge for that Steamboat and Flair match that they went 60 minutes, and a night of glory for Flair quickly turned into near tragedy. After Funk challenged him for a shot at the belt, Flair slightly downplayed his chances, and Funk took this to heart. It got to the point where he dished out a prime NWA WCW assault. Flair was destroyed with a brutal pile driver on top of the table and was contemplating retirement. This was a red-hot feud that also showed Flair in a rare role, a babyface. Fans were ready to cheer for him, and it was easy because Terry Funk played his role of a bitter and unstable old-timer a little too well. They traded promos, and it felt like a dark, gritty feud that was bound to go awry. Great American Bash, a great match with plenty of intensity. These two wanted to kill each other, and Ric Flair in particular looked like a lunatic. It stands out more with the way the story went. Funk goes crazy, and Flair matches it, and at times surpasses it. The feud would expand to include the likes of the Great Muta and Sting, with both men being allies of Funk and Flair. The feud continued to further display hate, especially from Funk, who suffocated Flair with a plastic bag. This led to a tremendous finale. I quit. This was a finale, and they made sure to wrap it up all nicely. Flair had to break Funk's leg to get him to say I quit, and that was enough for him to concede and show respect to Ric Flair. This wasn't the end of the year for the Nature Boy. He followed up with a solid match against Lex Luger and a great one against Sting. 1989 was his year. Ric Flair's 1989 was nothing short of special. Promo game, great. In-ring, amazing. He played both roles as a good guy and a bad guy, and it was wrestling poetry and wrestling chaos at its very best. Shawn Michaels was pretty notorious in the 90s, but this isn't something new. HBK was very difficult to deal with as time went on, but funny enough, his talent only got better. Michaels was destined for the WWF Championship up to this point. The reason why was because of his supreme talent and his consistency. He was far too talented to be denied, even if his attitude wasn't all that. But despite this, HBK didn't have too many issues in the lead up to WrestleMania. He started to become tougher to deal with later. Here, he was basically an angel compared to what he would become just a year later. Michaels wasn't exactly the best drawing champion, but that doesn't matter to me. If we go by best drawing champion, we don't have individuality. We chase success. This is one of my favorite years of a professional wrestler, and yeah, you'd hope a run like this would draw more money, but to me personally, my own perception of this run isn't affected. I don't care. Oh, it didn't make money. None of that money, not even a single percent's going to my pocket, so why should I care? HBK went on a super run starting from the Rumble in 1996. He won the match and quickly went into a feud with Owen Hart over the WrestleMania title shot. This match was excellent, but then again, Owen Hart in 1996 and Shawn Michaels in 1996 is a duo that would steal the show every single night. He had a great Iron Man match against the Hitman in WrestleMania 12. A match that plays a role in solidifying their legend status. I don't love this match as much as others, but to defend it, this was the first time something like this was done in the WWF, so it was always going to be hard to figure out unless you had a history of the match. That's why the next set of Iron Man matches are better. You can learn more from the concept. But this was up to this point. HBK's defining moment in his entire career, a moment he had been waiting for. And when they gave him the ball, his performances only got better and had a lot of variety. He had a story-driven feud with his former friend Diesel, a story that illustrated just how much the title can change somebody. Ever since he lost the belt, Diesel lost his cool, and it culminated in a great no-holds-barred match at In Your House. Two strong matches with the Bulldog, and although the story was bad, the matches weren't. HBK was going insane in ring at the time, and it was clearly taking a toll on him, but he lived by the motto, it ain't over until it's over. Vader at SummerSlam was solid, even good, but it depends on who you talk to about it. Personally, I don't think much about the incident and see it as a strong performance, showing how great of an underdog Michaels is whenever he faces a bigger opponent. He had a couple of overlooked matches on Raw, even a good match against 1996 Yokozuna, who wasn't in the right shape. Mankind in Your House is one of the greatest matches to end in DQ, my personal favorite. HBK was dealing with a deranged monster who deceivingly was stronger than everyone he dealt with previously. The Heartbreak Kid was going all out with every match. His run was grueling, and by the time he lost the belt to Sid, it was much needed. Not because of him, but because of how much that run cost him. It forced him to work even harder than he had in the last 3 years combined. Bret Hart was used to this kind of grind. The difference between mid-card and main event is huge because you have to become the face of the company. It's more than matches. The business is on your shoulders. Despite this, 1996 was a marquee year for Shawn Michaels and a year that saw him fire on all cylinders. The man just couldn't skip a beat to save his life that year. It was the best championship reign in ring and established Shawn Michaels as one of the very best. This man always had a chip on his shoulder and felt threatened by everyone. It was all about proving you belong in your spot. We can talk about the ratings, the house shows, which HBK actually did draw more than usual, but the one thing that remains important was his performances. Shawn Michaels in 1996 on lockdown, and without a shadow of a doubt, was the best all-around wrestler that year. Stone Cold Steve Austin was a much-needed shot in the arm for the WWF. This man exemplified everything attitude. He was a poster child to the Attitude Era and somebody that could do all the heavy lifting and draw like Hogan did back in the day. Austin's 1997 had plenty of road bumps, but nothing was going to get in his way to the WWF Championship. Austin's coronation was only a formality, and what made him so fresh is that he simply wanted to kick ass and didn't care about any fan support. When it came down to it, it was all about being the best and holding the belt. There wasn't much noble of the Stone Cold character, zero respect for authority, and most of the time, his opponent. He wasn't consumed by greed or fed up with the fans like Bret and Shawn, which is something that's very noticeable here. Austin won the belt and quickly got into an intense feud with Mr. McMahon, and this feud shows the brilliance of the WWF. The roster after WrestleMania 14 wasn't exactly stacked, so instead of just going with the flow, McMahon was positioned as a huge villain, seeing as he owned the entire company and had his minions, such as Dude Love, Kane, and eventually The Undertaker, who wasn't interested in playing that role, go after Austin. Every week the glass would share and so would Raw's ratings. Austin's matches were always the one to look forward to, and it wasn't even because of his skill, but because of how much the fans were invested in him. Stone Cold in-ring was much different to what he was in 1997, but it was a seamless change because the brawler with plenty of intensity was a perfect fit with his character. Stone Cold's match with The Undertaker at SummerSlam brought a then record buy rate of 700,000, and this wasn't even WrestleMania. This was the second most purchased event in WWF history, and was well deserved because they went all out with the Highway to Hell build. You feel Austin stands no chance with the dead man and the big red machine standing in his way. There was a fire and momentum with Stone Cold that hadn't been seen in over a decade, and one that caused a shift. His supporting characters expanded as the months went by, with Shane McMahon and The Rock coming in to add additional roadblocks to his path back to the WWF Championship. The Undertaker also became much tougher opposition with a newfound attitude, and overall, Stone Cold's 1998 caused a shift in wrestling history and redefined the role of a babyface. Austin was still a good guy throughout the entire year, but in a very different style, one that wasn't seen before. He broke records, featured in plenty of ads and promotional magazines such as the front cover of TV Magazine, and Stone Cold Steve Austin was so undeniable. And the best part in all of this is that he wasn't at his hottest in 1998. The lead up to WrestleMania with the most tough opposition he ever faced, including the entire corporation and the newly signed Paul White, led to record ratings for the World Wrestling Federation. And that build was WrestleMania 15 in 1999. I don't think there will ever be a wrestler as hot as Austin was in 1998 because everything is different now. That glass shatters and the crowd goes insane. Thousands of signs with the same man showcased in the middle. The Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Brock Lesnar entered the WWF as a hotshot with plenty of upside. He was an amazing collegiate athlete and won numerous accolades as a wrestler from Minnesota. Lesnar had some similarities to Angle in the sense of being a guy with all the potential in the world, but Brock's a little different. A freak athlete the likes the promotion hadn't seen. He had an unusual combination of size, speed, and most importantly in that era, aggression. Lesnar quickly rose the ranks with ease because he was legitimate. There was nothing phony about him, and if anything, it would be unrealistic for him to not dominate. The Hardys, Rob Van Dam, Test, he went through all of these names in his road to the king of the ring. This was the strongest push a wrestler received in years, and he was even stronger than Angle's in 2000 because Brock was undefeated and barely looked weak. When I mean weak, I mean someone in a position where they looked defenseless. He F5'd some of the biggest guys such as Mark Henry, and Lesnar was a sight to behold. He had a huge victory in demolishing of Hulk Hogan, and to top it all off, a star-making victory against The Rock at SummerSlam to become the youngest WWE champion of all time at the age of 25. Lesnar was a made man, and it only got better with a huge victory inside Hell in a Cell against The Undertaker. I think this victory is the one that took him even higher, because beating The Rock is great, but it's another thing going over The Undertaker and his own structure. But they're both important victories. The next big thing was no longer a moniker. his 2002 would come to a close with a new chapter. A face run, and for the first time in his career, it was without Paul Heyman. This was because of betrayal. It all set up for a clash against the Olympic hero at WrestleMania. Brock won the Royal Rumble, and this was all in his first year. I'm looking at his entire first year, and it's one of the most insane things you'll see. His first WrestleMania was a main event match against the best pure wrestler, hell, the best all-around wrestler in the entire company at the time, Kurt Angle. And these two put on a wrestling classic that gets overlooked because Brock wanted one of those extra finishes. Well, not him, it was Johnny Ace, but he went up top, so there's that. By the end of Brock's first year, he accomplished many things that most won't in their entire career. Two-time WWE champion, feuds with The Rock. All three feuds main evented their respective pay-per-views, and at the same time, Brock's potential wasn't fully explored just yet. Kurt Angle's potential is always believed to be high, and in some ways, WWE did try to push him soon and make him a marquee main eventer. While it was a tough try in the first attempt, Angle really understood what it meant to be at the top. He was meant to be a main eventer. 2001 saw him become at one point the most popular face in the entire company, and he stepped it up big time in 2001, and was the most consistent wrestler next to Stone Cold. And just when you think he's at his best, he proves everyone wrong, and suddenly he's in a league of his own. 2002, the best all-around wrestler the world had seen that year, but there's a reason why I didn't choose 2002 as a year to mention here, because there's another year that's just more ridiculous, especially when you see how hard Angle pushed himself. 2003. 03 was a year that really makes you respect Kurt Angle. It's not to say the previous years wouldn't, but I'm pretty sure if there's someone that didn't have much respect for him, would grow to respect him this year. Up to this point, Angle had no single weakness in his arsenal. Some people talk about his selling, but I think they tried too hard to make something a flaw. Well, actually, and all that nonsense, because it's Kurt Angle, bro. One of the best wrestlers of all time. 2003, Kurt Angle was a strong case for his best year because he got to play two different roles in both at the highest level possible as the champion of the WWE. He started off the year with an incredible match against Chris Benoit. This match is one he considers to be his very best, as Benoit matched perfectly as an opponent of his. If you watch the match of these two, they worked in a way that seemed like wrestling was a shoot. Obviously not the whole thing, because there's certain things in the world of wrestling that are magical, but they looked legitimate. I don't really watch Chris Benoit matches on my free time, especially during his later years, but the last time I watched this was for a video on the 2003 Royal Rumble. It's one of the best performances he's ever had. Angle really was gifted, but Benoit played a strong part in this match to show everyone the Olympic hero at his very best. You weren't going to see highs like this often from any professional wrestler out there. There's storytelling in wrestling, but this is one of the best examples of such. Angle was hurting at the time and was seen as someone that was on the verge of retirement. He was in a really bad place with his neck, and he was in a position where WrestleMania seemed like oceans away. WrestleMania was only 4 weeks away, and they were trying their very best to keep him safe and healthy. The WrestleMania match did go well, but both men were destroyed, and Angle went to have surgery later that week. It was expected for him to stay away for about a year and rehab properly, and another important thing to mention is that he lost a lot of strength in his left arm and had that match with Brock Lesnar under these conditions. That's why I have an admiration for that match and wish people saw it as a match that was much better, because they were practically building a card house under windy conditions. They were holding flaming rocks in their hands. It was bound to go awry, but Angle was out. Everyone expected him to come back around WrestleMania 20 time. Turns out he had other plans. The worst thing Angle did, though, was coming back to the squared circle only 2 months after surgery. It was a huge risk, but this didn't mean he was slower or any worse in ring. He always had a threshold to reach and made the most out of all his matches. A good triple threat match against the Big Show and Brock Lesnar, which saw him regain the WWE Championship, but this time as a face. And just when you thought you saw it all in the feud with Brock Lesnar, they switched roles. Now this dynamic is much better to me because Angle's the hero of America is perfect against a beast like Brock Lesnar. Two incredible matches, with the second being an Iron Man match, and there was high expectations with these two, but they matched and gave the fans one of the best matches in the entire year. Plenty of respect for Kurt Angle because he was held on by string and tape, yet still gave the best performances in his entire career. He refused to stop, and this wasn't even the end because he gave John Cena his best match up to that point in his career. Cena was still pretty green at the time, but Kurt Angle knew how to structure the match well to make himself and the Doctor of Thuganomics look good. He worked through injuries with a torn hamstring, overdosed on pills the day before his Iron Man match, and it's one thing to perform at your best when you're healthy, but it's another to give the very same performances while being injured and developing a bad drug habit. So that's why I added Kurt Angle 2003 in here. Insane stuff, and he wasn't even at 100% for most of the year. Samoa Joe had made some rumblings in the wrestling world with his classics against CM Punk in 2004. These matches played a strong part in both men signing with TNA and WWE. Joe was a very unique talent at the time. He had international experience and was very well versed. It sounds vague, but that's a great description of Samoa Joe. 2005 was a well-varied year that ranks amongst the best for a professional wrestler. He had his hands on everything while at the same time being considered one of the best wrestlers in the world. He started off the year with 2 solid matches against Austin Aries. The second match was way better and one that's often overlooked. Joe was delivering in tag team matches, singles matches, anything you throw at him. Another overlooked match was CM Punk. And this isn't close to their trilogy in 2004, but it's nice to see them battle it out for the final time in singles action. ROH Pure Championship, Joe and Lethal was a great one, and this was early on in Lethal's career. Joe wasn't losing this one, but similar to a couple of matches from that time, Jay Lethal got a lot in and had plenty of chances to win. Incredible match against James Gibson for the title, but the real standout from this time period was his match against Necro Butcher. It was a destruction of him with Joe looking like the strongest a wrestler had ever looked in a main event. He beat him within an inch of his life, and it was rough. It's a very dark match that showed no matter what Butcher did, Joe was gonna have an answer and then some. It definitely stands out for being a different kind of match in Joe's ear. But even then, there's still some better work here. This was around the time period where Samoa Joe debuted in TNA. He was presented with an undefeated streak. His first great match in the promotion was with Chris Sabin at No Surrender. While there's no reason to believe he would lose, they presented Chris Sabin in a great way. He was an amazing underdog here, and what makes him so good is that he makes you think there's a chance. It's not a big chance, but just enough to get the thought in your head. The ROH tour was still going crazy for Samoa Joe. Another great match with Austin Aries, multi-man matches, Nigel McGuinness, but then he met AJ Styles once again. These two stole the show at TNA Sacrifice. 2005 was an incredible time for both men, and in many ways, they helped put TNA on the map. Christopher Daniels ruined the finish, and you guys know what happened next. The greatest triple threat match in TNA history. One of the most pitch-perfect matches ever. Not a single dull moment, flippy stuff, Joe going crazy despite his size, and they made the X Division Championship seem like the most important thing in the world. And up to this point, this was already one of the best years a professional wrestler could have, but Samoa Joe's most iconic singles match was yet to come. One of the things I love about 2000's Ring of Honor, it feels like anybody could show up. ROH had a different feel to it in the 2000s. And here, an icon of Japanese wrestling, one of the best in-ring performers in history, showed up to the United States. Kenta Kobashi. He was a huge name in Japan and one of the biggest wrestlers to come out of All Japan Pro Wrestling. Some might consider him the greatest to come out of All Japan Pro Wrestling. Kobashi dominated the headlines throughout the 90s and early 2000s like no other person, but despite this, he believed that the American fans weren't familiar with him. So when he showed up to Ring of Honor, it was a pleasant surprise. He wanted to come in like the evil villain, but that crowd refused to boo him. And this is despite his opponent being the homegrown talent, Samoa Joe. Now is half of Kobashi's offense chops? Yeah, but it was incredible. The atmosphere is top-notch and one of the best in ROH's history. The story they told of Joe thinking he had one of wrestling's greats figured out was incredible. Kobashi brutalized Joe like crazy to score the victory after a hard-fought match. This will be the career of Samoa Joe. We have to talk about his career in a small paragraph. You better find a way to add this in there because if you don't, it would be a disservice to his career. Truly one of the best wrestling matches in ROH history, one of the best matches of the 2000s, and one of the best matches of all time. He had a hot streak of great matches near the end of the year, culminating with AJ Styles at TNA Turning Point. This is their very best match together. By this point, they were already used to facing each other, and it's just about mastering that chemistry. This is one of the first matches someone will think of if you talk about the best TNA matches. AJ Styles in his element, Samoa Joe casually having one of the most insane years for a wrestler, everything aligned here. John Cena was never one to be expected to steal the show. His in-ring skills were serviceable and solid enough to allow him to go to the very top. While he had enjoyed an already dominant run up to 2006, nobody was prepared for the year that was 2007. Now, John Cena, the beginning of 2006 to the end, are a bit different. Character-wise, he was now the Marine. And this was something I believe a lot of you thought. I'm gonna say this. I personally thought this man was an actual former Marine. Not in the Randy Orton way, but in the John Triton way. At the same time came a change in his in-ring skills. One thing that symbolizes this change is his comeback sequence. When he switched to the camo shorts and the shoulder tackles instead of the clotheslines, he got much better. That's not the single reason, of course, but it's Cena's knowledge of the squared circle that allowed for him to become a much better wrestler. He turned into a leader. Cena's year started off with an intense feud with Umaga, a feud that pushed him to bring out his most brutal side in a last man standing match. This is considered by some to be John Cena's very best match. The story is constructed perfectly with Cena practically wrestling an indestructible Samoan. It has to be the best iteration of Super Cena in a match, at least for me, because Umaga seemed like the toughest challenge he had faced up to that point, and he had to give him hell and then some to even have a chance. You don't see wrestlers breaking the turnbuckle and choking their opponent out for a win. It saw the importance of the WWE Championship. For Umaga to show this unbelievable resiliency and for John Cena to push himself to a point he wasn't used to. All of this in order to keep the most valuable prize in the industry. Next up, Shawn Michaels. This feud is the pinnacle of my childhood. If you've been around this channel for a while, you know I show heavy for WrestleMania 23 time, because as a kid, it felt like the biggest event to me. Cena and HBK were slight allies in the lead up to WrestleMania 23, while their SmackDown counterparts cracked with WrestleMania Far Out. Cena and Shawn as tag team champions were in a much different scenario, because opposed to Batista and The Undertaker, they managed to keep their egos in check ahead of the big match. HBK had the ball in his court, and with every week passing by, Cena was getting more and more paranoid that HBK would do what he would do. And in the end, he was right. WrestleMania 23 was an incredible night for John Cena, and in some ways, it can be seen as the night he was solidified once and for all as the guy for WWE. It's a bit of a stretch to be honest, but There's a bit of an argument to be made about it, although you have a better case for WrestleMania 22, because I think when you look at Cena's career, WrestleMania 22 is more important. Despite the Super Cena selling taken away from it a bit, it's still one of my favorite WrestleMania main events ever, and that's saying something. The rematch was in a smaller atmosphere, and while it doesn't match the incredible vibe of WrestleMania 23 in Ford Field, the action surpasses it. Cena and HBK weren't supposed to go as long as they did, but after Randy Orton destroyed a hotel room and was sent home, they were given the stage, and for 45 minutes, the audience was subjected to an amazing battle between Cena and Michaels. They put on a masterclass on how to pace a match and keep the fans guessing as to who would win. I'm glad to remember that I watched this match when it happened because it was that damn good. You can't go wrong with this match. The crowd in London understood what they were watching and reacted accordingly. Then again, Cena and Shawn Michaels actually gave them a reason to react, so there's that. Cena's April was world class. This was followed by Backlash in one of the greatest fatal four-ways of all time. This is the old head in me talking, but for some reason, they're just not able to get a fatal four-way nowadays to be close to this one. It just doesn't happen. And Cena only retained the title by the skin of his teeth here, with HBK making a very unusual mistake to cost himself the title. A Great Khali feud would put a title reign's quality in purgatory, but for John Cena, it further established his improvements. I don't think 2006 John Cena would deliver a match as good as this one, but here, it was much different. He had the leadership badge, and that alone makes things a lot better. 2 matches against Khali. The first was a normal short match, but it showed how well it was paced. Cena sold like crazy to make Khali look like a threatening monster, and he overcame him, but it wasn't a convincing win because Khali had valid reasons to complain about the result. So they did a rematch, it was false count anywhere. This match was even better. Khali was so slow and out of it, but Cena did what he did best during this feud: sell well. And this match was the best in Khali's career because John Cena sold well and they did certain spots despite Khali's limitations. And this is the thing, Cena should get more credit for how good or how decent these matches turned out. They're not world-class matches, I'm gonna say that right now. You know that, I know that, but he managed to fulfill their potential. I don't even think he managed to fulfill their potential. He managed to over-deliver. Khali can't walk around the ring much, so it's up to his opponent, and only Cena managed to figure out the code at this point. I think HBK had a solid match with him early on, though, I will say that. Vengeance Night of Champions was a sprint. 10 minutes and 5 of the most decorated stars of the last 10 years. I always chill for this match like crazy because it ends before it really starts and doesn't overstay its welcome. Great American Bash, a former All-American, former ECW champion, the uncrowned champion, Bobby Lashley. He thinks the title is destined for him, but John Cena's in the way. And what follows is another Cena carry job. Lashley wasn't as experienced at the time and pretty green, so watching this match, you're kind of stunned to see how good it ended up. If you have previous knowledge or watched Lashley, Cena's much more mature and you could easily see why he was the face of the company because he had a lot of these small attributes that would go a long way. SummerSlam against Randy Orton is one of their only matches that's unanimously liked. I really enjoyed this match because it actually delivered on the hype of the feud, unlike a bunch of their other matches. Orton was a massive threat in the build and during the match, and he was now an evolved legend killer, about to become the Apex Predator. This is the most SummerSlam main event you'll ever find. It just fit the show perfectly. Unfortunately, Cena wasn't able to close out the year properly due to a pectoral injury. Despite this, he was unanimously considered the best wrestler in the world that year for his efforts. We saw him over-deliver under the brightest lights with green opposition, rise to the occasion against the very best, and it's hard to argue with 2007 being his very best year. I know, I believe it is. He evolved tremendously in ring in 2006, and that showed more in 2007. Just like Tom Brady and Floyd Mayweather, 2007 was a career year for John Cena. Fans had waited several years for Roman Reigns to turn heel. With the pandemic, WWE finally decided to go through with it. Reigns himself refused to return unless they followed through with his demand, and instantly the change was felt. Reigns had Paul Heyman by his side, and at that time this was stunning to see because many people had imagined Heyman managing Roman. So to see it come true was a bit surreal. He was now the tribal chief. Roman Reigns was very comfortable as a heel, and he had a tendency to be a bit insecure, not as stoic as he'd hoped to show in the beginning. That would change as time went on though, because Reigns would grow much more confident as he continued to win matches. He made Jey Uso fall in line, and even though this was early in the story, there was a lot of praise for the Bloodline storyline. 2021 to me is the very best year in Roman Reigns' career. Almost every calendar pay-per-view had some sort of good to great match with him. And it's kind of ridiculous. Of course his opponents helped, but these matches involved the best version of Roman Reigns. He started off the year in an intense feud with Kevin Owens, an outstanding last man standing match with Kevin Owens at the Rumble, and there was a lot of bitterness and hatred for both men. I mean, Roman decided to become Rikishi for a moment because of his hatred for Owens. The moment he was handcuffed had me convinced he was losing the title. It was insane. Reigns continued to grow confidence in himself. He faced Daniel Bryan in one of his very best matches in his entire career. Bryan was presented as the man who had the answer to Roman Reigns and his championship. Edge was lurking like a madman, and this led to one of Roman's most iconic matches in his entire career. A triple threat match with hatred, jealousy, contempt, and ego. He stacked both men in a stunning moment to win the match. Roman followed up by getting rid of Bryan in a standout. This was also the night he debuted his Tribal Chief song. Bryan put him over like a great professional and left WWE. Roman's here still rolled on. He had a match with Cesaro that I can't see him having today, and this was a very different kind of match you'd expect from Roman Reigns, and we positively remember. It presented Cesaro as a great challenger to Roman and the title, somebody who actually threatened his position at the top. A random Hell in a Cell match with Rey before having the big singles match against Edge. This match is a bit divisive. I don't like it as much as others and feel like it had the crowd boost and went too long, and it felt like they were the ones that enjoyed this match more than the fans. But there's a reason why people loved it. It's because it was the first real main event with the crowd around. Now, SummerSlam with John Cena, on the other hand, is a different story. I actually really like this one and feel like it did right what their previous match couldn't. One of the best Raw matches of all time here. 3 men just destroying each other. You have to watch this match. It's a quick one, it's a great one, and it gives you an idea of how WWE was after SummerSlam 2021. This match would be loved more if Reigns actually lost, because other than that horrible ending where Roman won it by luck, this was one of the best in-ring performances from the title reign. I'm not gonna say the hate for this match is unjust, but the action was great. Reigns' match with Brock was a bit better than expected, but that's not saying much. Roman Reigns was really in his element this year. He stepped it up big time and had great character work on top of it. His segments were must watch just for the one-liners he'd randomly pull. The story was fresh and brought a lot of interest back to WWE, and it's undisputed. 2021 is the best version of the Tribal Chief. Daniel Bryan's 2021 is entirely unexpected. He was a mostly casual guy for 2020, and there was a couple of matches there, but not much. 2021, though, is insane. He gave Roman Reigns some of his best matches, walked into WrestleMania's main event emotionless, and still put on a show. This one stands out to me because it felt like he lost his passion. It's so weird to me how he main evented WrestleMania that year. It's just odd. He put over Roman and disappeared. This lasted for 4 months before he was all elite. AEW at the time had some incredible momentum. It was insane, and then they had this guy coming in for a run, and his passion was back. Bryan Danielson was all elite. They didn't wait to give the fans the dream match, the best bout machine against the American Dragon. Incredible atmosphere and an incredible match. One of the best matches in AEW history. There was a certain magic with this match, the hype for everything in the follow-up was great. Then he went on a random run with banger after banger. Nick Jackson, Minoru Suzuki, which was the best match from the set, Dustin Rhodes, Miro, and Eddie Kingston. Kingston, Suzuki, and Omega, these 3 were the special matches. Then he met the champion, Hangman Adam Page. Superb match, 60 minutes. These 2 painted the canvas with blood, sweat, and tears. What I loved about this Bryan Danielson run is that he was hungry. He wanted the best competition, and right out of the gate, from the first match, he went all out. This is a prime example of why he's one of the best of all time. We could have added his 2006 year in here, obviously, but maybe that's suited for another video. With regards to 2021 though, incredible. He went from WWE, putting over Roman, had that great match with Edge and Roman at WrestleMania, to AEW where he just went super insane. Amazing stuff. So yeah. Alright, if this video does well, if it gets 1,000 likes, we'll do part 2. There's a lot of wrestlers we could talk about in there, in depth as always. But I hope you enjoyed this one because I know I did. Make sure you hit the muscle buster on the like button and perhaps the FU on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.